Welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And as I continue to wade deeper into the regional music of so many different pockets of our country, it is always delightful to come across cats who aren't going back into the big band days per se, or the swing era, but they came up at a time when blues was, merging with jazz and Horace Silver and Les McCann, the gospel from the church. Eventually it became known as funk music. And that was some funky music called I Got Some Funk off his newest album. Renard, Poche, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Good being here with you, Jake.
You know, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about the idea of how you think it's best to go about expanding the vocabulary of music. I've talked to Ron Carter about it and other rhythm section guys, and the rhythm sections, they say they can set the table for new musical vocabulary, but in order to do that, the soloists have to bring their kitchen solos to the bandstand. And I just, in this time that we live in, put the coronavirus away for a minute, I just noticed, especially in improvisational music, a lot of homogenization of sound, a lot of comping. I don't hear a lot of individual sound. So I just wanted you to talk about how you think it's best to increase musical vocabulary on the bandstand.
I think it's an amalgamation of what you've experienced or what you're drawn to. That's how it works for me. I would assume that that's the case for pretty much everybody. We know what we've been exposed to, and certain things we're not going to be attracted to, so we probably wouldn't incorporate that in what we do. So I don't know if that addresses,
Well, can you personalize it based on your own career?
Okay. I grew up in a household where my parents were listening to Nat King Cole, Dinah Washington, the Platters, and my older siblings, I'm the youngest of five, they were listening to Sam Cooke, then later on James Brown. Then when I came of age to get my own music, I was, so that's all in there. And what I do, I mean, you wouldn't see evidence of, say, Nat King Cole per se, but those kind of arrangements with counterpoint and the big band era was part of my upbringing. So when I write material, I might have not just a melody, but counter melodies to that, or I might switch from strings to horns. I'll incorporate that type of arrangement in what I do.
I dig. No, I dig. Now we're cooking. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, so you may not detect Nat King Cole, but you were talking about like the experiences, your life experiences on the bandstand dictate individual sound and where you come from. So, can you talk about a definitive moment in your early career when, you thought you had stuff worked out, you got up on the bandstand and you fell on your face, and it was a humbling experience, but it made you stronger and it made you a better player?
I'm laughing because I remember when I was very young, maybe like 12 or 13.
Exactly.
Played at a talent show with the band that I was in. I was the leader of the band. And I don't think I had much experience playing live. I remember playing with the school band, and it was a nun, Sister Mary Hillary was the band director, and with the school band, I was featured. I went up and I did the song Second Line on the trombone by myself, and I was totally fine. And
Wow.
it was a small audience of maybe 50 people, mainly parents of the students. Then, I don't know how much later, we played at a talent show, my band, and I forgot to focus on what I was doing. I was so busy looking at the audience that I was messing up. And I distinctly remember my dad putting his hands in his face with his head down, like, oh my goodness. And I'll never forget that. So
Wait, I'm
think
sorry.
that,
I just wait. Hold on. This was a smaller band setting, or a lot. Tell me,
this
because you blew the bone in the school band. You pulled that off fine. So what was the venue
yeah,
when you fell apart?
it was a talent show. Like a school had a different school had a talent show where participants from throughout the city can go up and with their bands or sing with a record or what have you. And there may have been maybe 200 people in the audience, and it wasn't familiar faces. So maybe that was the difference for me. And I was playing guitar, and I wasn't as experienced. And I guess I was nervous to begin with.
Of course.
And I forgot to focus on what I was doing. I was looking at the audience too much and, just lost my composure.
Did you I'm trying to go back with you here a little bit. I had a chance to, I talked to you about this guy, Peter Chuck Beatty, and there was, and then I also interviewed a guy named a drummer. Let me just figure out this cat's name for a second. His name was Charlie Suhor. Does that name ring a bell to you at all?
No.
So was Gruss. What was the major Grunwald's music store? Was that your era, or was that place gone by the time you were? Or were you? And I just want to be clear: were you born in New Orleans?
Yes.
So
Yes, I was. Do you mean Werline?
That was the other one. There were two of them. There was Grunwald's and let's see. I want to just read. I want to read you this this story, and then have you get your opinion on it. I said you're gonna crack up when you hear this. So basically, Jimmy Garrison, Coltrane's group, came into town, and they said, Peter Beatty said, Garrison broke his strings. He on his bass during the show, and someone like Eddie Safransky or someone might actually, actually tie the strings up during the concert. But Garrison after the show was asking Chuck Beatty, where can I get strings? He said, well, Grunwald and Werline are the only ones, and they're closed. I told him if he hung out with me till daybreak, I'd get him some strings. So they went over to Big Time Crips, which was a bar owned by William Sonia. They called him Big Time Crip because he got both his legs blown off in Italy in World War II. Anyway, Jimmy Garrison started yelling at him. But the point is, what was the music? So Werline's was the store that you were frequenting for music?
Yes, at that time. I've heard of Grunwald's, but I don't know where it was, or I've never been there. So I don't know if that was before Werline's or if it just wasn't as popular.
It was before. Yeah, it was definitely before.
Okay.
It is, Renard, it is such an honor to talk with you for a variety of reasons. And I wanted to put this, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. And I want to put this voice in for you right now and listen to the content, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Okay.
Where the Native American ethnic group, the Houma Indians, had their harvest festivals. it has always been a very spiritual area used for special occasions and events. Okay, so and during the days of slavery here in New Orleans, the somehow the slave owners felt it was to their advantage to allow the slaves some kind of freedom, some kind of, I wouldn't call it freedom, but I would say it was the opportunity to release some of the tension, to release some of the aggression,
right,
to release some of the despair. Okay, so what they would do is they'd open up this huge area, and there would be 300 to 600 enslaved people in this area every weekend. Okay, and it became a place of great importance for many reasons, because New Orleans is a port city, and that meant people were coming to New Orleans, and one of the points of interest was what happened in what they really call Place Congo. That's what it was called, Place Congo, or translated Congo Place.
Okay.
And later on, it became Congo Square when people they're out of ignorance. Okay, so but at any rate,
what happened? What happened at that time?
What would happen? Well, what happened? Well, let's talk about what happened. What happened in this place would be this: there were different ethnic groups. There were people from different areas of Africa that were enslaved here in Louisiana, and there were some significant numbers of different ethnic groups where if you went into the center of Congo Place or Congo Square, as they call it, you would see this. You would see a group of musicians and dancers that were doing traditional Congolese dances and singing in Kikongo, okay? Or you would see people from Senegambia, or different people from different ethnic groups, to the degree that people could determine the ethnicity of that particular ethnic group by their facial markings, or the clothes that they adorn, or the drums that they played, or the songs that they sang.
Right.
So what would happen is that one ethnic group would play, and when they would subside, then another group of people who played an entirely different style of music to some degree would perform. And over a period of time, this is what happened. They began to trade they began to share these rhythms, which were already African rhythms, and they had a relationship in a relationship to each other already. They were already playing certain patterns that were indicative of their own music, because there was a certain amount of homogeneity in West African and Central African music. So there were similarities already. But here's what happened. Instruments like the banjo were created. Actually, the first actual trap set or drum set where a guy sat down and played.
Yeah, that was a long-winded answer. Take a guess.
I'm thinking that's Bill Summers.
You are 1 for 1, a double to the gap. Beautiful job on that. That was my interview with Bill from November 2015, and I've been interviewed Ndugu, Chancellor, and other French Creole families that essentially were run out of Louisiana because they had successful businesses because of the color of their skin, and they went out to Southern California. And I was just kind of hoping you could talk about the way your parents educated you guys as it related to diaspora and the understanding of the rhythms that came along with your people unconditionally from the motherland.
Oh, my parents knew nothing of things like that, if you're talking about in musical terms.
I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is, did they educate you as to where your ancestors came from and how they were forced to this country?
No.
And why not?
No. They just didn't. That just wasn't part of our dialogue.
Okay, so I mean, because a lot of cats would say that, like what we talked about earlier, where your individual voice and your music and your sequencing of ideas comes from your life experience, and so many of the cats that I've talked about, I mean, it came from segregation, it came from prejudice, it came from bigotry, it came from being rejected from classical orchestras. They were head and shoulders above the rest of the bass players trying out, but because of the color of their skin, they didn't make the cut. So, I mean, you're telling me that none of this, I call it cultural bias because I feel like we're all one human race, and I don't really feel like, I feel like people grow up in cultures that teach hate and teach cultural bias. So I have a hard time with the word racism, but would you say that any type of that bigotry, racism, prejudice, segregation, did it at all factor into your life experience and your creative art?
It definitely was a part of my life experience. My brother and I, as I mentioned, I'm the youngest of five. So my brother Roger, who was number 4, he and I integrated a school. He's 4 years older than me. It was a Catholic school in uptown New Orleans, and we integrated it, and that was quite an experience. More so for my brother than I was, because I started in the 1st grade, he started in 5th grade, and maybe in the 1st grade they just weren't that aware. And then because of my complexion and hair texture, they may not have known what I was. But they could tell that my brother was African American. So he went through a lot of rough stuff. And I feel as though I experienced it as well because he and I were so close. So,
you just said something really interesting, Renard. Like in 1st grade, like my younger daughter's in 2nd grade, but like in 1st grade, you talked about they didn't recognize yet. So what do you they didn't recognize that you had a different skin color and that they were supposed to treat you as less than subhuman? What do you mean by that?
They probably didn't know that I was African American, and something else that makes me believe that is the case, because I remember after school one day, one of the nuns was chewing out my brother, and then she said, "And why is this little fella always hanging out with you?" So, and he said, "Well, that's my brother," and I guess she didn't make that connection.
I want you to talk about this as best you can. This is such a beautiful, is your brother still alive?
No, he died in 2001.
So can you talk about, because maybe your folks didn't, Bill Summers was an ethnomusicologist and, from the get-go, and he dropped out. He basically left Detroit and went to UC Berkeley and started working with an ethnomusicology professor out there, the only black ethnomusicology professor at Berkeley, I think maybe ever really. But what would your brother say to you? What are the things that you remember most about after a hard day? Maybe he got beaten up or called horrible names or just, and you were feeling broken because your older brother was being harassed for no reason. But what would he say to you, about tenacity, looking straight ahead, walking straight ahead, and being yourself? What is the salient stuff that you remember your brother saying based off that integration of the school in the north, in the school that you integrated?
Well, let me mention that, and maybe I should mention this in conjunction with your first question about what my parents taught us.
Yeah.
I don't know what conversation my dad had with Roger, my brother, when school started, but Roger did tell me that the first day my dad said, "Okay, Roger, it might be difficult, but do this and no fighting." So that kind of, I remember Roger saying he felt like, okay, well now what am I gonna do? I can't fight. But let me mention that I asked my dad when I was like in my 40s, and I asked him, why did he send us to that school? Because, at the time when we went there, I was in first grade. You don't question your parents.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Why this, so we were just following
sure.
Instructions. So I asked him, why did he send us there? And my dad was a carpenter, and he did carpentry occasionally at another school, another Catholic school in uptown New Orleans that was an all-black school. And he said the nuns told him, "George, you got 2 young boys. Why don't you send them to one of the schools that are being integrated? We need people to get this thing started, get, integration started." So he said that was the reason. He wanted to be a part of the civil rights movement and integrating the schools. So that's why we were sent there. And I went from 1st through 8th grade. Roger went from 5th grade to 8th grade. He was the first black male graduate. There was a black female that graduated a year before him. He was the first black altar boy at that school.
So I just want to be clear about this. Is really amazing. First of all, what an honor to talk to you, because this is groundbreaking and, quite frankly, very courageous in so many ways. But when the slaves came here, your ancestors, and nobody realizes this, but because our history books are, basically, you learn a little bit about Egypt, and then all of a sudden civilization starts with the Greeks and the Romans, but actually it started in Africa. But when your ancestors came here, they had their own spiritual religions, Santeria, and all sorts of religious drum ceremonies and things like that represented their own spiritual purview. And slave owners and people like that were like, oh, by the way, they aren't Christian. So that's why they are subhuman. That's why they have different type of skin. They're inferior. So, why did you choose to go to I don't know what denomination it was, but were you guys Christian, Catholic, or, because that seems like your whole, I guess what I'm trying to say is all that spiritual sanctification and rudiments and indigenous religion and stuff was stripped away from you guys. You were never allowed to practice what you were truly spiritually guided by. And I just wonder how you came to terms with the fact that you were practicing a religion that basically repressed your entire culture.
Well, again, being kids, my parents my dad was Catholic. My mom, I believe, was Methodist, but she converted to Catholicism when she married my dad. But again, as children, you just do what your parents tell you to do. So it wasn't, and we didn't have that knowledge that you just stated. So,
right? Yeah. No. Maybe more like. What are your thoughts? Do you give it any thought? Have you ever really, as you've gotten older, with perspective about? I think it's cool. I'm 42, so who am I to? I don't know anything. I'm just a blind monk stumbling into grace, and I don't claim to know anything. I just wonder, looking back on it, in your experience, your brother obviously was a forerunner, but for you, musically, what was the most gratifying experience in that school that you had, if at all?
Well, I excelled in music. Okay, I'm going to jump back when you mentioned.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, so my Roger was in the school band, maybe and started in 5th grade. He was in the school band, and he was like, we were always together because he would walk me to my godmother's house. I was too young to be alone, so we were always together. He was in charge of me. And after school, if there was a band rehearsal, he was playing the drum set, I was there. And I wasn't that interested in music at that time, even though I was around it. It wasn't until I think when I was in 4th or 5th grade, a representative from Wordline's music store came to the school and demonstrated the band instruments in order to get the younger kids interested in renting or buying instruments from that store and, joining the school band. So, I remember sitting in the school auditorium, and it was a man playing, he played the saxophone and flute and drums and everything. And when he played the trombone, I lost my mind. And at that very moment, I said, that's what I'm going to do the rest of my life. And I just knew it, and it stood true. I mean, it's odd to say somebody like 10 years old making that kind of decision, but I just knew it. It just touched me that much. And I wonder if the reason it was the trombone, that may have been his main instrument. So maybe he performed on it better than the others. There's no way for me to know, but that's what perhaps that would be the thing. So I got the trombone and practiced all day long. I remember my dad saying, why don't you go outside and play ball or something? And I said, no. I think part of the rationale, my reason and my drive and passion may have been, again, me being the youngest of the family. If we did any sport or board games or anything, I was always the worst. And I never knew that it was because I was the youngest. I was just like, man, I'm not good at anything. So I was determined to be good at something. So I said, I'm going to be good at this trombone playing. So I put in the time and the effort, and it was effortless because I had so much passion, so much desire for it. So like in my first or second year is when I was singled out. I was the only person that played a solo like that. So I was the star member of the band. So I'm thinking that answers your question as to the most gratifying moments in music, at the school. That would be it.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm also just trying to get an idea of like, maybe you didn't consciously recognize it, but again, I'm just trying to figure out for so long the saxophone, Coleman Hawkins, Ben Webster, I think Dave Bartholomew had a big band in New Orleans, but I mean, all these like Sonny Coltrane, all these guys, they were coming out of R&B and bebop, which was still the lead instrument was the saxophone. And then when you started to get into electronic music, plugging in, and you had guys like Hendrix and Larry Coryell and Leo Nocentelli and all sorts of stuff like that, all of a sudden the guitar became the lead instrument, and the horn kind of took a back seat. And I'm just trying to figure out where you were at in the late 60s and early 70s, and were you, you started to get off on the bone, but, when did you start to get into other instruments? Because now we have a situation where, because like Freddie Green, you look at those guys that are playing rhythm guitar. That foundation of rhythm is intoxicating. And now we have situations with younger cats who grow up and they don't even really know how to play rhythm. They don't even know how to play time because we're saturated with material, and the onus is on facility and technique. And oftentimes that turns into wanking it. And you're not a wanker. So I'm trying to figure out where you came in on that and how you learned to say what you needed to say without wanking it.
When you said wank, I don't know if I know what you mean when you say
No,
wank.
okay, thank you. You know, you're the man. No, listen, wanking means you're just spitting out repetitive lines. You should have stopped 10 minutes ago. You're wanking it.
Uh-huh.
You're not saying anything new. I mean, there's the idea of having a beginning, a middle, and an end to a solo. You say what you need to say, and then you let somebody else take over. If you go too long, you're just wanking it.
Yeah. Okay, I got what you're saying. Well, I would like to think that I've been blessed with good taste. I mean, as a musician,
Yeah.
I have strengths and weaknesses. Like I can honestly say, especially coming up, I didn't really have a good ear. I had an okay ear, but a lot of my peers, they could say, "Oh no, that's not the note. It's this note, or it's not that chord." And actually, still today, my ear is not my strength. I mean, it's from years of playing and being around different people, it's decent. But I think I always had good taste. And I always had a good sense of composition. So I think instinctively I knew how to do the beginning, middle, and end, and not go on for eternity into boredom. So that's that. But I would also like to think that I'm a team player. Because actually, when I first started playing music, as I mentioned, the trombone just blew my mind. But there was a guy in the neighborhood that showed me and my brother how to play guitar, and there was also a cousin that played guitar. So we learned that. But my interest was the trombone. But I did learn, and I could get around the guitar fairly well. So the first couple of bands I was in, they needed a guitar player more than they needed a trombonist.
Interesting.
And I distinctly remember having a band rehearsal when I was like 11 years old or so. We were rehearsing, or I could say as Dr. John, we were rehearsing, and one of the guys...
Rehearsaling.
Yeah, we was rehearsaling at one of the guys' mother's house. And she came in the room. She said, "Well, I don't know if y'all realize this or not, but you guys sound better when he plays the guitar than when he's playing the trombone."
Wow.
And it wasn't because the trombone wasn't good. It was because we didn't have a keyboardist. So if I wasn't playing the guitar, we didn't have a chordal instrument. So I wound up playing guitar more than trombone, and actually for a while I had stopped playing trombone altogether because we needed a guitar player, and that happened several times with those first few bands that I played in. So I wound up being mainly a guitar player as opposed to a trombonist because of that. So in hindsight, I was fine doing it. I didn't dislike doing it, but I did it because, if you're a team player, you do what the team needs.
Absolutely, man. I mean, did you find yourself, was there, I don't know what kind of music it was, but did you find yourself playing primarily rhythm, or I guess maybe the question is, how did you learn? My daughter's going through it right now with a teacher who she's a very good teacher, but I really had to, and I'm not a musician, so I can tend to be a little bit sort of esoteric in what I want, but my daughter's learning to improvise, leaving the head of the tune and then, going off. And I mean, in those early settings with the guitar, were you primarily just, trying to, put that David T. Walker rhythm into it, or that that jagged rhythms, or were you also learning to find your voice?
Well, let me state that in those early days, okay, when I started playing in these bands, it was probably like 1967, and we were doing soul music. So we were learning songs by James Brown, maybe some of the Motown stuff, but Motown was beginning to cool down around this time that we were doing our thing. So basically, I would learn the songs that the band was going to play. I would learn it off of the 45. You know, that's what we were learning songs off of. So if it was a song that had a guitar solo, then I would either learn that solo or play something similar to it. Like I do remember, like in the late, 68, 69, we did some Hendrix, but my skills weren't of that caliber that I could cop, or my ear wasn't good enough to cop all of that stuff that Hendrix was playing. So I would just learn the main theme and just do whatever felt Hendrix-like.
No, that's perfect, man. And you were, and just to be clear, it was either a 45 or maybe something you would hear on the radio and just be able to hear it once. There was no rewind button, so you kind of had to use your imagination.
No, I couldn't learn it off of the radio. It was off of the 45. You know, we also bought albums, the 33 speed, you know, the 12-inch vinyl. So we would learn things off of that. And I remember, and I guess this goes to me having an instinct for composition. I created a medley, and I called it Santana 1, and then I created another medley that I labeled Santana 2. I couldn't play all of that solo stuff that Santana was doing at that time. So I would play the melody of maybe 2 or 3 songs and combine them in a way that was musical, and it worked. We had, you know, 3, I can't tell you what songs they were right now. So that's what and really when I think about it, the first band that I had, that really started making some noise, the name of the band was The Bold Souls.
Oh, I love it.
I remember,
I love it.
Yeah, The Bold Souls. And the first couple of talent shows that we did, we didn't win. We didn't place. And then I thought, well, if we did a medley, maybe our chances of winning would be greater because we could show more diversity and more talent if we did more than one song. So maybe we had a 3 to 4 minute, maybe it was 5-minute window. So I would create these medleys of, 2 or 3, maybe probably 3 or 4 songs. And I would do this. I would arrange it, present it to the band. They may have had some input, and we started winning talent shows. So I didn't really answer your question.
No, there's no right. I mean, listen, we're off in the intergalactic at this point. This is so important, man, because, we are in it. We are saturated with visual material today. And the thing that was special about you guys, your generation, is that you learned by ear before you learned to read by sight. And that's the crisis in music today, is that you go into schools now and you're learning to read music before you're learning to hear it. And what happens then is your ears get locked. This is not me. This is Gary Bartz talking, okay? You cannot hear deeper when you don't have the ear training. And you guys were basically autodidacts and learned off the records. Or in some cases, like Bird and those guys, they just listened to anything on the radio and they learned how to play the tune in every key. And so their ears were wide open, and as a result, you had this degree of individuality that was, you seem like you fell in the pocket. I wanted to ask you about a guy I had a chance to interview, this guy, the Big Chief Monk Boudreaux. You know Big Chief?
Yeah, I've backed him up a few times before.
Because they started playing at a club that would have been right in your wheelhouse around the time of late teens for you, and it was called. Let me pull up the. It was called H&M's. That's where the Mardi Gras Indians first started to play live. Did you ever?
I don't know of that place.
So, yeah, no, I just want to I want to read you this. The Wild Magnolias. Did you know those guys in that band?
I know who that is.
Right. I just want to read you this. I just want to.
The group
yeah.
With
Willie T.
Willie T.
Yep.
Yeah.
Willie T.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Uganda and Big Chief.
Well, I know Uganda.
Oh, rest in peace. This is what Big Chief told me. He said the Wild Magnolia.
Wait, Uganda passed?
He passed, man.
I did not know that.
You got to follow me. You got to follow me on Facebook. No, he passed 2 weeks ago, and that's why I sent you that interview so you could listen because it's a great, definitive Uganda interview.
Because actually, I subbed for him. There was a tribute to Dr. John at Tipitina's maybe like 4 months ago, and he was going to be the percussionist, but I was told he was sick and couldn't do it, and they asked me to be the percussionist.
Wow. Well, I mean, because you know better than anybody, but there's a killer soundstage recording from Chicago in '74 with Fess and Uganda. You know, Uganda was his major conga player, was Professor Longhair's player, and it's incredible to see. So he left the body a couple weeks ago, and rest in peace, Uganda. This is what I just think that this is fascinating stuff. So this is what Big Chief Boudreaux told me. He said the Wild Magnolias were the first Indian group to play in the bars. People used to pass by and hear the sounds. The first bar we played at was H&R. They had a cigarette machine in there, and there'd be a guy over there banging on the top of the cigarette machine, getting that bass in there. One guy had a brush comb, and there used to be these metal ashtrays in the bar. He would be beating on them to get that cowbell sound. We made our own instruments because if you had the sound, you could get it from anywhere. We had friends who would beat on congas like Uganda. I eventually went and bought some timbales because the rhythm was already in me. Where did you start to? What were the clubs that you started to shed at and get sort of get your feet wet once you became a professional?
Okay, that would be the Nightcap, which is in Uptown New Orleans. It was called Club Crescendo before that.
Club Crescendo.
It's the same building.
Wow.
Yeah, the Meters used to play at the Nightcap.
Because did they play? Was it before? Was it with Arthur, Neville, and the Hawkettes, or were they already known as the Meters at that point?
See, the Hawkettes is before my time.
Got it.
So the Meters played. Yeah, I know that. So the Meters played at the Nightcap. I don't know if they played there when it was. Okay, I'm not going to state this because I'm not positive, but I think they played there like on a Wednesday. The Meters, it's a fascinating story because they weren't drawing big crowds back then. They were drawing the same size crowds as the bands that I was in that nobody ever heard of before. It was like the Meters were ahead of their time, and to me, they didn't get their proper due. They weren't appreciated for the genius that they were until much later, until really after they disbanded. So like now, art is gone, but say like in the last 10 years, 20 years, it's a big deal if the Meters played. People would, pay big money to go see him. But back then, I think it was on Wednesdays, they would play, and it was like $1 or $2 to get in there, and they had a decent crowd, but it wasn't packed.
This is so. I think you're spot on. I mean, I've interviewed Leo. I mean, there's a lot of weird blood in there in that band. It is bizarre, and I'm not going to pretend to even dissect it. But they did a lot of road dogging. But even when those those early albums came out on Josie, did they get a lot of radio play at that time? Those albums now are worth $60 to $100 easy. Those original albums, and it's fascinating, but I guess maybe because we know them, they're almost folkloric now with Zig and George Porter Jr., who's a dear friend of mine, and is it fair to say that most patrons for jazz in Harlem, using that word, I hate that labels, but a lot of the patrons of American black classical music were white people, and a lot of I interviewed Ellis Marsalis, another rest in peace. I don't know, he passed on.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So when I interviewed Ellis, he just said that historically black colleges wanted nothing to do with Alvin Batiste and Harold Batiste and the AFO, and it's just striking to me that do you believe that part of it was like just with the Meters, obviously they weren't drawing huge crowds, but was it just this sort of same idea that their own people never really understood, or for that matter respected their own music?
Okay, I'm gonna.
And this is just listen. I want to be clear. There's no. This is you were on the ground. I mean, you're not Duke Ellington. You don't stretch back that far. But I want your honest opinion about it. There's no. I don't really.
Well, I'm laughing because at that same nightclub, the Nightcap, I was the original guitarist with the Neville Brothers when they, formed, with Cyril, Charles, Art, and Aaron.
No, wait, hold on. Hold on. I have okay, I want to be, this is so important because Cyril because Charles went to New York. He was in Angola and then went to New York. But Aaron and Cyril formed the Soul Machine. Were you in the Soul Machine?
No. I'm talking about the Neville Brothers.
Got
band.
it. Okay, got it.
So that would be like late '77.
So it's with the Wild Chupatulas. Chapatulas. Thank you.
What?
You were the guitar player in that band.
No. The Neville Brothers. The Wild Chapatulas was their Uncle
Jolly.
George Landry, who they called them Uncle Jolly. That album they had, I think it's the Meters on the record. There's a rhythm section. The Neville Brothers are singing background.
You are on fire, dude. You are right on point, dude. Wait, because that was Big Chief Jolly. That was that band. Meters were the rhythm section, and
on the record. I don't know about live.
Absolutely. So then when the what was the year that the Neville Brothers formed?
Okay, so what I was getting at is early. We had a gig at the Nightcap, and I remember we were playing stuff. We were playing some songs by the Wild Chapatulas. We were playing some of the Meter songs, and then some traditional New Orleans stuff. And I remember somebody from the audience yelling, "Hey, play something by the Commodores." And it was just, it was insulting, but it was also funny that they just didn't get it.
Now,
the audience was pretty much all black at that time.
No, okay, so just this is so important. Just for the people listening around the world that may not, why was it insulting? Explain why.
Because this is a group with so much New Orleans heritage.
Yeah.
You know, Aaron had already had the big hit with Tell It Like It Is. Art and Cyril, well, mainly Art was in the Meters, and the Meters do have 2 songs that went into the top 40. I have a book called the Top 40 Hits of the Rock Era, and Sissy Strut and Sophisticated Sissy made that list. So you have, you know, these. They weren't so legendary then, because, you know, this may have been in like 1978. But they just didn't get where the Neville Brothers were coming from. They were not a cover band, you know, doing the latest hits by Earth, Wind, and Fire and all that stuff. They were coming more from New Orleans tradition and from an original point of view.
That is unbelievable. So, I mean, the people
the person who yelled that from the audience just didn't get it.
No, you know, I mean, to be fair, I think the first Commodores record was pretty hot, but at that point in the late 70s, they were just covering other people's music, basically.
Well, let me say this. This could have been 1979, because I played with the original Neville Brothers band. It was me and my brother Roger on bass. Actually, remember I mentioned that band, The Bold Soul?
Oh, yeah.
So when that band broke up, when, you know, guys got of age where they were either going to go to college or go into the service, that was a big band. The Bold Soul was like 9-10 pieces. The people that stayed was me, my brother Roger, and my dear friend Gerald Tillman, who was a saxophonist, and I talked to him, and he could play a little keyboard, and I said, well, look, why don't you convert to keyboard? So we started a band called Blackmail. Blackmail was
so cool.
Was the first rhythm section that the Neville Brothers had.
No, wait, hold on. Oh, this is so important. But I think, didn't Art was playing B3, so the other cat could play piano, or how did that work?
They swapped. They had like a piano and a clarinet, and Gerald was also a good singer, so they wanted more background vocals, and Gerald was a good writer and arranger and stuff, so he was a big part of the beginning of the Neville Brothers thing.
Okay, and I want to be clear about this. It was Charles.
Let me mention that
there's
a book. The Neville Brothers have a book, and Art mentions that there's a paragraph, there's a chapter called Blackmail, and it mentions how when they decided to start the Neville Brothers, that they know they needed a rhythm section. They needed a drummer, a bass player, and a guitar player. And Art mentions that he remembers seeing Blackmail because we did some shows with the Meters. And he said that, they contacted us, and he actually said he remembers Blackmail as being funkier than the Meters, which I don't agree with.
That's in writing? That's in writing? That's in writing from Art?
It's in writing.
You got to be. So wait, I just want to be. So Blackmail, the Meters were cooking around mid-70s. Blackmail did some gigs with them. That's when Art got hip to you guys. And when the Neville Brothers started, why wouldn't Cyril have played drums?
I guess they wanted him up front, so he could dance and stuff.
Okay, so I'm trying to get in my mental.
Drummers,
yeah.
A lot of drummers, because what's his name, Jeffrey Osborne, I think Teddy Pendergrass, Marvin Gaye, I think they were all drummers, but they could do better being up front.
Right. No,
so that may have been why.
So this is just so that we can set the scene here at the what was the name of the club again? I'm sorry.
The Nightcap.
The Nightcap. So we had Arthur Neville and Mr. Tillman trading off on clavinet, keyboards, vocals. Aaron and Cyril up front singing.
Well, Cyril would play percussion, like congas.
Exactly. Oh, absolutely. No, yeah.
Like that.
Actually,
yeah.
and just bringing up, I mean, his mentor was Uganda. So again, Uganda comes back into the picture because they used to sit on Lake Pontchartrain and work out rhythms. And then was Charlie back from New York?
Playing saxophone. Yes, from the beginning, because they rehearsed at where my studio is now. When we first started rehearsing at the Neville Brothers with blackmail in the rhythm section, those rehearsals.
Oh, this is so ridiculous! Ridiculous.
That I'm in right now.
What's the name of the building? What was the name of the building?
Well, it was my parents' house, and we had a studio for the Bold Souls and blackmail. My dad was a carpenter, and my dad and Roger and I, we built the studio so we would have a place to rehearse in.
And Roger was playing bass with the Neville Brothers.
Yes.
And you were playing guitar.
Correct.
Is there any cassette tapes of this stuff? This is ridiculous.
There's some stuff floating around because somebody recorded us at Chipotina's because we used to play there frequently. And Roger became he stopped playing bass for a long time, and he became a sound engineer. Oh. And he had loads of tapes, but they got lost in Katrina. But there are tapes out there. I just don't
they're floating in the somewhere off the coast in the Gulf.
No. There's people like we did a tour in Santa Cruz with Professor Longhair and Dr. John, and somebody let me hear a recording of us with the Neville Brothers from those late 70s. But I don't even remember who shared that recording with me. We were on an airplane somewhere, and somebody gave me their Walkman, and I heard it.
All right,
so there's people with this stuff. I just don't know where.
This was because the year I was born in '78, and this is so interesting to know the Neville Brothers, because I remember when I've interviewed. We got another Name That Voice for Renard Poche, and let's put this in, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Well, one of the elements was, like I said, that was kept alive was the spiritual element, and that in New Orleans, especially, it seems it was able to survive and flourish, and in New Orleans, and just in the European mind, it was called voodoo, and in New Orleans, hoodoo, based on the Yoruba Vodun religion, and there was another religious sect from the Congo area, and that was the music was the main connection with the people and the spirits.
I don't know if I can
I'm more interested in the content than the naming that voice.
Okay.
Was the main one that connected at a ceremony, at a spiritual ceremony or a church service, like in New Orleans, the spiritualist churches and the holiness churches, they called them. The way they dressed and the things they did in the church after going to Haiti and really witnessing a real voodoo ceremony in Haiti, I realized that that's what they were doing in those churches, and that even the possession, they called it, or the being ridden by the Loa, where the spirit came in and took over the person and spoke to the people, was in the church they called it something else, but they dressed in white with the tignons on the heads of the women. They're all in white dresses, and their movements. When I saw that thing in here, I said, well, this is exactly what they were doing in the church, like the church where Mr. Lasty was the pastor and the drummer. They would, it was the same thing, but they called it, like the connection, where it had come from there was no history written about any of this.
I know. I mean, this is. I'm just going to. Renard, you want to at least wager a guess on that?
I have no idea.
That was my first interview from August 2017 with the late, great Charlie Neville.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And can you just talk a little bit about any memories? Charlie was such a free bird. He spent a lot of time in Angola for 2 joints. He wound up going to New York. He was the one brother who the Soul Machine, they got out of there and they played in Memphis for a minute. They went to New York. But can you tell me a good Charlie Neville story? Or just what was his charisma like, or what did he add to the team? I mean, Art I never got a chance to talk to, and I haven't, and I interviewed Cyril, but I haven't interviewed Aaron yet. But Charlie, it was just, to me, is one of the most beautiful human beings of all time. And I know he didn't, he wasn't a huge talker. He certainly didn't brag about stuff, but he struck me as a really pretty deep cat.
Yeah. He was doing some demos at my recording studio. This was long after I, was gigging with them. And he gave me a present. Well, actually, whatever I was charging, he said no. He gave me more than what I was charging. So that tells you something.
Wow,
right there.
That's amazing.
And then I remember one time he brought me a book. I don't remember exactly what it was, but he was a very Zen kind of guy, so it might have been about metaphysics or something. But yeah, he was definitely a deep spiritual guy. Always smiling, always pleasant. Yeah, just a very deep, like you pinpointed it. He was a deep guy.
Well, you're a deep cat too. No, I mean, I just love the Zen. Yeah, because he had to, even when he got out of Angola, he was still, he was hooked on on heroin when he went in. And when he came out, he got back into it, and then he had to find Tai Chi in New York, and he wound up going, Tai Chi saved his life for a long time. He got the hooks out of him. But, Renard, we're going to have to, we've just been cooking here for 65 minutes. We're going to have to do part 2 because we barely got to anything I wanted to talk about. But I wanted you to talk to people around the world that are hearing this now and or going to listen to it after it goes up as a podcast. And if you can, thread the needle and talk a little bit about what gives you hope for the future of music and how you are adapting to a new reality as a professional musician.
If you're referring to the COVID-19 situation?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, the way I look at it, you can only play the hand that you're dealt. So the hand that we're dealt now is the isolation, the social distancing, stay at home. Even though the city has opened up a little bit, I'm, choosing to keep my distance. And I'm, okay, just like when you mentioned Charles Neville being incarcerated for 2 years, when I asked him about that, he said, man, I really got good on my horn during that time.
I know he did, so because he was there was a beat. Go ahead.
He didn't expound on, oh, it was terrible, this happened. The benefit was that he was able to focus because it was pretty much nothing else he could do. So that's the position I'm in now. I'm practicing more. I'm working on my next album. And now I don't have the distraction of doing gigs and preparing for gigs. Because preparing for a gig, a 3-hour gig could be 30 hours if you put into it rehearsals and just overall preparation. So I'm making much better progress. I'm much more focused on completing my songs and my personal practice on my instruments. So there's a benefit to it. I mean, I'm horrified at the amount of people that are sick and dying, but on my did I address?
Well, I look at it and I mean, you don't strike me as somebody who's like overly caught up in like a formula trip gig. So, rehearsals, that's kind of a dirty word in my book, and to me, it's about singing for your supper. So I'm wondering if there are ways that you have figured out a way to make a few bucks, not playing concerts on Zoom or things like, on new media, but
okay.
I'm trying to say like
Okay.
maybe the gigs are burdensome, but at least you can sing for your supper,
Mm-hmm. Well, what I started doing a few months before the virus, the pandemic, was I posted something on Facebook. I just decided, man, I've been playing guitar for like 52 years. I want to share my knowledge. So I put that on Facebook and said, if anybody's interested, let me know. So I had a few students, and since the lockdown, I'm going to say, a few of them dropped out because, they can't come, and they weren't interested in doing it via FaceTime. So I do still have a student that I'm doing via FaceTime, and he's been very generous. So, and we have one lesson a week, and he's going to start doing more. So that's a little bit, but I'm not in a troublesome situation with that to begin with.
Right.
So,
No. I just wanted,
Yeah.
my part of my, and you're blessed for that. And I think that my peers as a Gen Xer, I'm always looking for creative ways of creating something out of nothing, because basically that's how the Jake Feinberg show came about. And I feel like now it's like the idea that communal gatherings and music will most likely be the last thing to come back, and that is with a big asterisk, because that is only predicated on the government providing assistance to independent music clubs so that they can actually survive. I'm always interested in the different ways that people are figuring out how to survive. I worry a lot about my generation. They were touring a lot, but really it's impossible to keep up with the cost of living today based on what they're paying live bands, even if it's a big venue. I mean, and I think it's, we're just in it for the long haul. And like you said, we're in with the hand that we're dealt. And I just, I'm hoping that we can come out on the other side of this in better shape. But my gut tells me I don't know. I worry a lot. We're not. I mean, you look back to the time that you were in the. The Soul band. What was the band's name?
Bold Souls.
Bold Souls. That was around the time of the Detroit riots. And what did the government do? They put huge amounts of money into Detroit for arts programs. I mean, that's where all this amazing avant-garde music came from. But they recognized that the arts was a productive thing, and the culture and arts was a profession. Musicians were professionals. This was something that was important, especially to minority communities. And I just feel like we're so far away from that now that they're more apt to bail out Popeyes and Chick-fil-A than they are to bail out independent music venues. So I mean I've been to New Orleans 3 times in the last year and a half before the coronavirus. It one of the most unique, hippest places to be. Still has a regional sound. But I'm just looking across the board, and I'm just a little bit petrified about the way that our society still views. Do they still see musicians as a viable profession? And you know what? You don't have to answer that, but it's just, I question that on a major level now. Even though, I mean, listen, Dizzy and Miles, those guys were never millionaires, but they certainly had successful careers. There was a huge studio scene for a while. Musicians were seen as a viable profession. And now it's pay to play or play for the door. And it's, it's interesting. It's not like a lot has changed, because you just said the meters used to play and, they charge a couple bucks at the door and nobody really knew who they were. But if you made $20-$30 a week, you could pay your rent. I mean, you could get by, but with the cost of living today, it's an uphill climb, and that's one of the reasons I do my show. So, Renard, it was really such a cool hang with you, man, and let's do part 2 real soon.
Sure.
All right.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, and bless you and everybody around you and your family, and be cool.
All right. Same to you, my friend.
All right, man. Be cool. Later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Later.
Bye. Renard Poche, dropping knowledge on the Jake Feinberg Show. That's it for now. Have a beautiful weekend. Until next time. Peace.